The first time I ever heard the forest breathe was on a trip I hadn't even planned. I was supposed to be passing through, just a quick overnight, on the way to visit a buddy a few towns over, but the trailhead caught my eye. The way the maples leaned across the gravel lot like old men beckoning me closer. I figured I'd hike in a mile or two, pitch camp, and call it a night. Instead, I stumbled into one of the strangest evenings I've ever spent in the woods. The air was heavy with the smell of wet leaves. A storm must have passed through earlier, because every branch dripped steadily, plinking against the undergrowth like 1,000 tiny clocks, ticking out a sync. I found a spot on a low ridge where the ground was firm and the pines stood like sentries, their needles dark with rain. I set up my little canvas tent, got a fire going, just enough to make some tea, and leaned back against a log with that deep satisfaction that only comes when the work of camp is done. That's when I noticed it. The fire snapped. The crickets carried on, but underneath it all there was this rhythm, a slow, drawn-out inhale that seemed to move through the soil itself, followed by a long exhale that bent the grasses at my feet. At first, I thought it was just the wind funneled through the valley, but no, this was steadier, deeper, like the ground itself had lungs. I sat very still, my mug of tea cooling in my hands, listening to it. The sound swelled, paused, then sighed again, and for a long moment I felt as if I were camping on the chest of some great creature, asleep just beneath the earth. It was eerie, sure, but not frightening. More like being let in on a secret the forest usually kept to itself. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing but tricks of the weather. But as the fire dimmed and the shadows pressed in, I realized I wasn't going to sleep easy that night. Something had stirred in me, the same way the ground seemed to stir with each phantom breath, and I couldn't help but wonder, was I imagining it? Or was the forest truly alive in a way I'd never known before? I'll never forget how the first true shiver of unease crept up my spine that night. It wasn't the darkness, though it was thick as tar under those pines, nor the owls calling from somewhere high above. It was that breath. Once you start listening to something like that, you can't unhear it. The forest seemed to pulse with it, each inhale drawing the canopy tighter overhead, each exhale loosening the undergrowth until the leaves rattled like bones. I stoked the fire higher, more for company than warmth, and the flames painted long arms of light that danced across the trunks. That's when I caught movement at the edge of the glow. Just a twitch at first, then the full rustle of branches shifting where no breeze should have been. I leaned forward, every muscle strung tight, and told myself it was probably a raccoon or a deer nosing through the ferns. But deep down I knew. The sound was too deliberate, too measured. I thought about grabbing my pack and making for the trailhead. But pride, or maybe stubborn curiosity, kept me rooted. I'd been camping alone enough times to know that most fear is born from the mind, not the woods. So I sat still, poking at the fire, and waited. Then it came again. The inhale, drawn so deep I swear, I felt my chest rising with it, followed by a long exhale that snuffed the smoke sideways. The shadows seemed to lean closer, as if the forest itself were bending down to take a better look at me. And then, from somewhere just beyond the firelight, came a sound that froze me in place. It wasn't the crack of a branch or the scurry of paws. It was a low, resonant hum. Not quite human, not quite animal, but carrying a tone that vibrated in my teeth. It rose and fell with the rhythm of that strange breathing, weaving into it like a song sung by the earth. My first thought was that someone else was out there. Another camper, maybe, or a hiker gone astray. But the hum never wavered, never broke into words, and it circled the camp in slow, deliberate arcs. I felt it more than I heard it, buzzing through the ground, trembling through the soles of my boots. That's when I realized whatever it wasn't moving around me. It was moving beneath me. I sat there, half crouched by the fire, every nerve screaming at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. The hum kept circling underfoot, rising and falling, like it was passing just beneath the skin of the earth. At moments it felt so close, I thought the ground might give way, as if some vast chest would heave upward and toss me aside like a loose stone. Finally, I forced myself to act. I grabbed my lantern, lit it quick, and took a few steps beyond the reach of the firelight. The forest was a cathedral of silence. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Only that low, steady rumble, beating in time with my own pulse. I swung the lantern side to side, hoping to catch the glint of an animal's eyes. Nothing. Just the sheen of wet bark and the endless weave of shadows. I tried stomping the ground, hard, like I might scare off whatever lay below. The hum deepened in answer, thrumming through the soil until my teeth rattled. That was enough for me. I turned back to camp, heart pounding, and sat with my back against a tree. At least that way nothing could sneak up behind me. But the forest wasn't done with me yet. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the pine needles around the fire trembling, not from wind, but in little bursts, as though tiny breaths were being exhaled from the dirt itself. One patch, then another, until the ground seemed to shimmer with invisible sighs. My fire, weak from neglect, sputtered as if each breath tried to smother it. That was when I did something I can't quite explain even now. I spoke. Just a whisper, barely more than the crackle of flame. I hear you. For the first time all night, the rhythm broke. The hum cut off. The phantom breathing stilled, and the forest seemed to hold its breath with me. I sat there, lips dry, waiting for whatever would come next. The silence pressed so heavy I thought I'd gone deaf. And then, from deep beneath my boots, so faint I nearly doubted it, came a reply. A single echoing thud, like a heartbeat rising from the belly of the earth. My lantern flickered. The fire collapsed into coals, and I realized with a bone-deep certainty that I was not alone on that ridge. The fire was little more than glowing embers now, and the lantern cast a trembling circle of light that felt far too small for the vastness pressing in on me. That heartbeat, the deep, slow thud, still echoed in my chest, though I couldn't tell anymore if it came from the earth or from within me. I thought about running. I really did. The trailhead couldn't have been more than 1.5 miles downhill, and if I moved fast enough, maybe I could outrun whatever was beneath me. But another thought pinned me where I sat. What if the thing wasn't following me at all? What if I'd stumbled into it, some sleeping pocket of the world that wasn't meant to be disturbed? The coals hissed softly, casting red veins of light across the pine needles. And in that glow I saw the ground shift. Not sink or crack, but ripple, like water when a fish stirs just below the surface. First a small swell, near my boots, then another a few feet away, moving in slow rhythm with that unseen breath. I found myself whispering again, though I hadn't planned to. I didn't mean to intrude. My voice shook. The forest swallowed the words, but almost at once the ripple stilled. The hum returned, softer this time, almost like a lullaby winding down. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, I had passed some kind of test, that if I stayed still, respectful, I might be allowed to see the night through. But then the pine behind me gave a sudden shudder, needles raining down onto my shoulders, and I heard a sound that froze me harder than the hum ever had. It was laughter. Low, breathy, childlike laughter, echoing from the dark beyond the lantern's reach. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't warm either. Just curious, like someone or something amused at how close I'd come to bolting. I turned the lantern toward the sound, heart hammering, and the beam caught nothing but an empty swathe of brush. Yet the laughter came again, circling me the way the hum once had, always just out of sight, always at the edge of hearing. The ground's heartbeat quickened with it, matching my own until the forest felt alive with pulse and play. And I realized then that whatever was out there wasn't finished with me, not by a long shot. I don't think I breathed at all in those next few minutes. The laughter kept circling, weaving between the trees, soft and airy, like it was being carried on the same invisible breath that pulsed beneath the soil. My lantern flickered in my trembling hand, shadows darting like quicksilver across the bark. I knew, deep in my gut, that if I ran, the forest would close in behind me, swallowing the trail before I could ever escape. So I stayed. I knelt by the fire pit, fed it the last of my kindling, and willed the flames to rise. For a heartbeat, the light leapt high, throwing the trees into sharp relief. And that's when I saw them. Not figures exactly, but outlines, like silhouettes drawn in mist, child-sized, thin, their edges rippling as though they were stitched from smoke and moonlight. 4, maybe 5 of them, swaying just at the tree line. The laughter hushed, replaced by something quieter. Not words, but a murmur, soft as water, trickling over stone. It rose and fell with the earth's breath, folding around me until I felt like I was standing in the center of a song too old to understand. My fear ebbed then, not gone, but dulled by a strange sense of belonging. Whatever these beings were, they weren't here to harm me. They were watching, perhaps even welcoming me into a rhythm I'd never noticed before. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at them through the wavering firelight. At some point, exhaustion dragged me down. I must have dozed off against the pine, because when I woke, dawn was bleeding through the branches. The forest was alive again with birdsong, the hum and heartbeat gone, the soil still. My fire had burned down to ash, and there was no trace, no footprints, no bent grass, nothing to suggest that night had been anything more than a dream. And yet, when I packed up to leave, I found something odd near the fire pit. A pine cone, charred black, on one side as if it had been placed in the embers, but fresh and green on the other. I hadn't put it there. I slipped it into my pack, and to this day it sits on a shelf in my home, untouched by rot. Needles still sharp and green as the night I found it. I've camped many places since, but I've never again heard the forest breathe. Still, sometimes, when the wind moves just right through the pines, I catch a whisper of that hidden rhythm. And I wonder if, on that ridge, I wasn't just a camper, but a guest.